Go. Toby, good to see you on my podcast here. This is the Heroes Podcast, another episode with Toby Nagy. How are you?
Good, thank you, Andre. I'm really well.
Thanks very much. I want to introduce you to my audience. Well, you are the one who is helping people to launch, entrepreneurs to launch their next idea. And of course, you're a managing director, educator, and startup specialist. And of course, you own and manage BCF Coaching Academy. Yeah?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
So tell us, how did you, because I didn't ask that question myself. I know you for a while. I know you're an iconic figure if I need to ask for help. But how did you end up at this wonderful place of helping entrepreneurs?
Well, that's quite an interesting story because the story goes back 30 years, right? So it's not like I just thought about this and it just came in like a minute. I've been an entrepreneur now since, well, next year's going to be 30 years. I've been running businesses, a range of businesses in a range of areas. And also been mentoring, coaching businesses now for well over 20 years as well. So as part of my journey, I'll be running businesses, but also helping others with their businesses. And it's interesting because I see the same things over and over again occur in business. And it wasn't until I really thought about this, and I actually did a master's in entrepreneurship and innovation. The reason why I did the master's of this entrepreneurship course is because I was really fascinated with the mindset of an entrepreneur and what makes people successful and what doesn't. And the question, of course, the big question out of all of us is, can entrepreneurship be taught? And for me, it's still a question mark. Why? Because skills can be taught, right? You can easily do a course and become, learn how to do financial modeling, all that sort of stuff. And you're not born an entrepreneur, regardless of what people say, are you born or you made, are you born a leader? No, you're not born a leader. You're not born assertive. But what I did discover was along the way, through doing a fair bit of research into entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs themselves, and talking to lots of entrepreneurs, well over sort of 30 entrepreneurs, successful ones, what I discovered was that entrepreneurship needs to be discovered. So you can go and do a course, you can actually have experience of running a business or being an entrepreneur, but it doesn't necessarily make you an entrepreneur. So it's a certain something that occurs that you discover it. So it's really an intrinsic and innate thing. Some people don't discover it. Some people discover it when they're 8 or 9, right? Others don't discover it till in their 40s, right? So you've heard of the typical entrepreneur having, the lemonade stand, the swap card business when they're really young. That's really comes from encouraging parents. So encouraging parents to develop. And one of the key things to entrepreneurship is also imagination. That's imagination and creativity, two important things. Now, our society tends to push us away from being imaginative and being creative. We've heard our parents say, don't dream or stop dreaming when we're kids. I was children to say, just, dream big, dream hard, lie back on the grass and just look at the sky, the night sky, and then dream hard. That's what I would recommend any parent to be encouraging their kids, because you never know where your child's going to end up right in life. And if you certainly do have lots of encouragement, that's a vital thing in discovering entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship has to be discovered, right? So because there are certain skill sets other than what you can learn from university, like risk-taking behavior. That's something that you don't go to, risk-taking behavior 101 at university. It just doesn't happen, right? Because, university is about being risk averse. So over the years, I've been studying entrepreneurs, and of course, I had an opportunity to be a lecturer at university. My professor at university said, you're really great at what you do. I want you to go and basically do a course, teach a course. And the first course I did was international business strategy. And it was only 1 hour, but essentially it just opened the door for me to kind of come to a point where I realized, wow, this is me. I found my gift, and my gift is around speaking and sharing knowledge and wisdom. So during this process, what I did do is I developed a course called Startup Fundamentals. And essentially what it was, instead of, you go to business school and you write business plans, which are all BS, right?
Yeah.
Because in a startup, you don't know what's going on. But what we did is we developed a thing called Startup Fundamentals, where students in 12 weeks come and test and validate their idea instead of running a business plan. And they work with customers or prospects, and they test and validate and using a sort of a particular process, using the lean startup methodology. Now, what was interesting was some of the outcomes that came from this. And of course, when we first started asking entrepreneurs or students, do you want to become entrepreneurs? And 80% put their hand up. After 12 weeks, we asked the same question: do you want to become an entrepreneur? Only 5 or 10% put their hand up. The question is, why? What's the drop in 70%, 75%? And the question comes back to the fact that they need coaching. So universities are great at teaching skills, but they're just lousy, or coaching is not in their mandate. So what I decided to do is put together a program. I started teaching this when I was retired in Fiji, so running it with Fijians, and it was really good because people come to me and say, "Can you help me start my business?" And I'm like, "Well, okay, let's start a course, a program, and let's test and validate it." Again, I was using the same methodology that I teach people in my own business, right? So I walked the talk. So we tested it, and then COVID came, so I had to come back to Australia. So I was just sitting around thinking, well, what do I do? Anyway, so it occurred to me that let's take this program online, right? Let's try and help as many people as possible, right? So in a long nutshell, that's how the Startup Fundamentals did come, because I love helping people. I love entrepreneurship. I love innovation, and I love education. And this whole process, the BCF Coaching Academy, with the Startup Fundamentals program that I run, marries it all together. It's essentially a 90-day program, and it's a 4-stage process where you learn, you build, you test, and launch, right? But you don't launch until you thoroughly test it, because at the end of the testing, there's only 3 outcomes. 1, let's go ahead. 1, let's kill the idea, or third one is pivot. And most people do a pivot, because very rarely do you see a business start, have an idea on starting, and end up in the same place. They're always opposite. So what can happen is it can fail, or you can just pivot, basically. And the reason why they pivot is because the market is the dominant force. So the market tells you how to build your business. No matter how good you think your business is, right? End of the day, it's the market, the paying customer that I guess influences how your business is going to look. And in the day, how do we test it? How do we know if business is valid? It's simple. Does it have a paying customer or customers? Right. So
I love that.
It's simple. It's a simple process. If you can't get a customer, then maybe you should reconsider. But what we do essentially is we teach businesses how to build a business that's unique and valuable. So too many people doing unique businesses. So another mousetrap. We don't need more mousetraps. Other people doing valuable business, but not unique. So they become commodities. What you want to do successfully, if you want to build a successful business, it has to be unique and valuable. So through this process, we teach you how to build a business model and how to create it like a market dominant position, or what's known as pretty much a competitive advantage. And that's really important, to build that right from the start, not to try and work it out as you go along. So we always begin with the end in mind, like the exit. So that's how it all works. Yeah.
It's very impressive, Toby. I mean, you seem to have found the missing pieces of traditional education, where I still see people running around with MBAs, and I don't like labeling anyone or any organization as good or bad, but I'm not too sure sometimes how valuable that is in the real world, in the real environment, where the market might slap you in the face 10 times before.
Well, I think, I think Mike Tyson said that. He said that you might have a plan, but goes out the window once you punch in the face, basically. And that's the reality of startups, because you go to do an MBA, you can go do all those courses, but end of the day, the difference between a startup and say like an ongoing business or an MBA or growing business is the fact that in a startup, you got to hustle. You got to learn how to hustle. Now, it's
Mm.
easier to start a business, right? When you got resources, when you got money, when you got a marketing team, when you got all these things behind you, right? But as a startup, most of us don't have those resources. So the key to success in startups, if you don't have the money, is you got to hustle, and you got to learn to hustle. And if you don't know how to learn to hustle, then that can be a problem. And hustling means just leveraging resources, essentially, right? So, you know, we say in a term, beg, borrow, buy, or steal, but don't steal, right? So often that's what you tend to find is, you know, entrepreneurs are leveraging their peers' resources. And that's why it's important to have a team, because the team is the ability for you to leverage, and leverage is the key word, right? So people miss out on.
Yeah, when you said hustle, like the word that comes into my mind is actually not give up, try it another way, and then keep trying it. And when you were telling me about you're able to have this feedback mechanism, what works, what doesn't, I was wondering, like, where do you draw the line for your students? Where, you know, you hear these stories where people's been trying to push through an idea, even, you know, some of like Rocky, the stories of Rocky, or I think J.K. Rowling, they tried 195 times to put through their ideas and they got declined. Like, where do you draw the line for your students? Or where do you say to someone, let's pivot and give up on this?
Yeah. And that's a good question, because it's a constant changing landscape. So what I notice with people, they either give up too early or they give up too late. So I always say to people, okay, and you know, when you give up too early, you kind of maybe even just one strike away from a home run, basically.
Yeah.
And you see it often happens. And I say to people, and I had this colleague of mine just come to me the other day, and she said, look, by December, I'm going to give up my business. And I just said, don't give up your business. Just take a break, have a breather, step back a bit, because you're exhausted. Don't give up, but just take a break from a while. Anyway, she rings me back about a month later, whatever, and she said, "Oh, I'm just flat out now." So that's the nature of the beast. It's famine feast type of situation. Now, what I say to people is, first of all, give yourself a time frame to do this. And the other thing to also remember is that most entrepreneurs fail about 9 or 10 times before they succeed, right? And failure, when you fail at something, it's not a failure, it's a learning opportunity. Now, if you don't, excuse me, if you don't learn something from it, then it becomes a failure. So if you, in other words, if you repeat that failure over and over and over again, and most people tend to do that, right? Not most, some people, they do something and they repeat it and they repeat it. And their definition, you know, is that we'll keep doing the same thing. And then try to get different results. Well, that's insanity. Whilst other people learn quickly. And I guess there's certain things that you require as an entrepreneur. One is a learning ability. The other ability is, I guess, is to be flexible and agile. And most of the time, people are blighted by the cognitive biases. So it's the cognitive biases that actually destroy your entrepreneurial capability, because you're not able to transform, right? So it's through, you know, through, I guess, reflection, self-reflection, and, you know, all these tools that are available. But the thing is, if you are able to transform, then that certainly helps. And transformation, I mean, by learning as you go along. So the trick to entrepreneurship is to try and fail small, fail early, fail quickly. So small steps, right? Don't go for the leap, right? Because you could get yourself in the hole. And I always say to my candidates that, you know, fail on a $5,000 mistake. Don't fail on a $150,000 mistake, because typically mistakes are the same, right? They're just magnified because there's something that you haven't learned. And one of the things I always urge my candidates or my participants in the program is stay close to the customer. Now, too many people focus on the solution, right, and the technology, whereas good entrepreneurs focus on the problem. They fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Most entrepreneurs fall in love with the solution. And the reason why you need to fall in love with the problem is because customers don't care about your solution. First of all, they don't care who you are, right?
Yeah.
They don't care about your solution. They don't care about your technology. They have a job to be done, or a headache, or a need, or a want, and can you fill it, right? So coming back to, at what point do we give up, or what point do we keep going? It's a bit like Cowder County, Kenny Rogers. You got to know when to hold them, and you got to know when to fold them, and that generally comes with a lot of experience, right? But what I say to people is, in my program we have a particular framework, and if the idea goes through that framework, right? There's about 8 steps in the framework. One is, obviously things like, do you have a paying customer? They're really important, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a product like do you have a good fit, right, for the business? Because if you don't have a good fit, you're not doing what you love, then it's probably not a good fit. And then can you build a competitive advantages is another thing to look at. And of course, is the market big enough? Is the market growing? Right, really important. So don't do things like automotive, right? Do things that electric vehicles, electrification of transport, right? Get into those fields that are growing, because a rising tide lifts all ships. Now, when you are looking at your idea and trying to turn it into a business, you've got to go through a particular framework, and we provide that framework, and we show you how, not just what to do, but actually show you how to do it. And that framework, if that idea doesn't fall in the framework, then you've got to be realistic enough to say, well, maybe it's not a good idea. And the best way to get an idea, right, is to have 10 ideas and be flexible around that. Because at the end of the day, it's not about the idea in itself, right? It's about, how do I solve the problem? Because in a problem, you can have many solutions, right? Just because it's your solution doesn't necessarily mean it'll agree with the customer or the problem itself. So very tricky to try and work out, when do I give up? But generally speaking, I say to people, give yourself 6 months, then reassess it. Now, if you are moving ahead in some form, right, then keep extending it. The other thing to remember is, when people start a business, it typically takes twice as long to start a business. And I've built business in developing countries, and it actually takes like 3 times as long. So just because you think you're going to launch in 6 months, no, give it 12 months. All right. Especially if you're new at business, right? Because it always does take longer to get traction. And also that what you want to do is we call this the flywheel effect. So you try to spin that flywheel until you get a breakthrough, right? And that's when you want a good thing. Now, if you're spinning this flywheel and you're not getting anywhere, and when I mean getting anywhere, ability to get customers, right? That's how we measure it, right? The ability to get paying customers, then one would want to maybe reconsider or pivot, basically, the idea. And it's okay to pull back on an idea. It's okay that it doesn't work, right? But what we can do is not give up, just try something else, or try it in a different format, which is kind of a pivot. All right. So it's a very hard concept to try and get people to tell, to tell them that, first of all, their baby's ugly, and to tell them when to stop. It's not intuitive sometimes.
Yeah, Toby, you sharing pure gold here. I should have taken notes, and I think whoever was going to watch this is just giving you every principle to start and run a business, or how to pivot when it's time. I'm wondering, what is the next big jump for you? Like, you are on top of the food chain as far as I see. Like, you've done a whole lot of things that you haven't even talked about in Fiji, and doing a lot of community service. Like, how could you now take this to another level? Is it coming down to impact of numbers and people or countries? Or
it always comes back to impact. I think what you want to do is you want to create something that's efficient, that you can impact the most amount of people in the shortest amount of time. Now, I've noticed, people work one-on-one, But if you want to get impact and efficiency, you've got to work 1 to 30 or 1 to 100 or whatever it is, right? That's how you get most efficient impact. I know this because I was lecturing at a university, and I had one-on-one previously one-on-one coaching with people, but you can only impact one person at a time, which is great. But when you were able to broadcast that message, some of the classes I had were like 300 students, and I was running the course, and I developed a course, and I could really impact people. And you do see that impact in people's lives. They come back to you with the feedback, or they might come back 6 months later. They go, "Wow, Toby, now I get it. Fantastic. I really, really appreciate what you taught me." And I encourage all my students and candidates to keep in touch with you. If it's not through LinkedIn and Facebook, and so I can, we can chat, we can monitor the progress, and I just see some fantastic progress on people. So in terms of where are we going now, for me, it's not about working one-on-one with people. That's part of the process. I want to work with 1 to 30, 1 to 50 type. So coming back into that education system type of approach is the way to go, except not running it through your traditional education system like an RTO or a university. And the reason is it's too stifling. As an entrepreneur, I don't want to spend 4 years trying to do a course just so I can start a business. I want to do it as quickly as possible. So I want to try and do a nimble course, and I can learn really quickly with experienced coaches like myself and some others. Excuse me, I'm bringing to the program. Now, as far as what I'm doing at the moment, I've launched a venture lab in Singapore, and I've been able to pull together some amazing people, 6 amazing people, or 5 in myself. I want to call them that amazing, but the people around me are super amazing.
You are.
No, when I work with these amazing people, then I realize how limited I am. But that's okay, because you walk into the room and you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. I want to be with people that I can learn and grow from quickly, who are going to help pull me up, right? So we've launched this Asia Venture Lab, and our purpose around it is basically for assisting in the well-being of basically humanity, society. And what we're doing is we're commercializing sustainability technology. And what we mean by that is things like renewable energy, waste to energy, plastic pollution, waste, social housing, food, sanitation, all these things that are contributing to the well-being of humanity. What we're trying to do is work with corporates to help solve some of these key problems they're having, right? So we can't rely on governments to solve problems, right? Because governments are too stretched and they actually don't know what they're doing. So what we need to do is we need to work with governments, business, and the community to help solve some of these problems, including plastic pollution, for instance, is one of the biggest ones. So we're setting up a venture studio. What we're doing is working with corporates, and then what we're doing is we're bringing cohorts of students in, training them, developing enterprises, and then helping solve some of those problems primarily through technology. All right, technology is the enabler, but we don't focus too much on the technology. We focus more on the problem, and that's why we work with corporates. I mean, for example, one of the examples we're working with at the moment is one of the largest footwear manufacturers in the world, and we're focusing on a particular region that's Indonesian, and they have about 40 factories in one particular area that just do footwear for one company, right? And they're having a problem with rubber waste, right? So they come to us and said, well, how can you help us solve this waste? Now, we can throw this in landfill, or we can repurpose it and find out other uses for it. Another example is solar panel manufacturers have come to us and they said, we've got a problem with waste. We've got a problem with the recycling of the solar panels, because beginning 20, 25 years, they have to change them over. So we want to work with the solution. So these are things, that kind of areas we work with. And we want to build these ventures and want to use my program that I've developed over the last sort of 3 years, and use that as an engine to drive these cohorts or these small startups that we're working on, and helping them raise capital as well. So that's the big picture stuff.
That's massive impact. I mean, I only see them as probably almost pilot solutions that are then later on could be maybe scaled to on a larger, maybe international corporate space. That's what I would.
Well, absolutely, and that's why we work with the corporates, because they are able to leverage that, right? If they can solve it in one problem, chances are they've got a problem in a similar country. Because most people, when you look at venture capitalists, accelerators, incubators, they develop a technology, an idea, and then they go like fishing for the market, right? And it takes a while to get traction. But we're actually going hunting because we already have the market. What we're looking for is hunting for a solution. It could be an existing solution, or it could be one that we can develop through a cohort. Here's the problem. Let's build it together, and then what we can utilize all that experience. And in our team of 6 people, we've got over 210 years experience of starting businesses and venture capital, angel investing, all that sort of stuff. So if we can't build something, can't commercialize it, then we've got a problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
In ourselves. You know what I mean? So, and we're looking, and part of the thing is we're going to measure impact. So we're going to measure ESG, obviously, but also it has to be scalable as a solution as well. I mean, just think of the footwear manufacturer. When they've got factories all over the world, they employ millions of people. Plus, we can also look at other footwear manufacturers, Adidas, Brooks, Reebok, because I'm telling you, they probably have the same solutions, so same problems. So what we want to do is we want to also work industry wide. So we work with industry bodies as well to try and solve some of these key problems, key challenges.
So who would be the best? And I know you're working on a broad horizon, but who would be an ideal connection for you if someone is watching this?
Well, just 2 areas we would love to speak with people. One is if you know a corporate, it's got a particular environmental, social governance problem, particularly environmental, because climate change and climate risk is one of the biggest things that we're facing at the moment. Right? It's the most pressing, urgent challenge. So that's why if we work, if we work at the corporates, it's usually around the pressing issues of climate change, because that's urgent. Social governance, not so much. Yes, it's good to have good social things, but the pressing thing right this very moment is climate. So we want to work with corporates and access to corporates who have a problem, who may want to come and talk to us. They don't know how to solve it, or people that have technologies. So if you know anyone that's got a particular technology, at the moment we're talking to a particular rubber tire recycler, and what they do is they take out the steel belt. They also take out the fabric, and then they crumb the rubber into like what we call rubber crumb, and then they build building blocks from it, right? Low cost and well suitable for sustainable housing in places like Africa and Asia. Right. So, and everyone has a tire problem, let me tell you, right? Every single country, right? So they want to raise $10 million. They want to set up a pilot program. We have that technology. We're working on that technology. So part of our job is also to help raise funds for these particular technologies, but essentially trying to match them to the corporate problem, because the corporates are the ones that can fund this. In $1 million or $2 for corporate is nothing. If you're a multi-billion-dollar company, it's peanuts, right? You got to invest, $2 million is a lot of money, right? Depending on how large the investor is, right? But that's what we are trying to do. So 2 things: corporates and technology.
Powerful. And so how do we find you on the internet, or where are these projects if someone is really... And I have a person now from Hungary who has some technology that you may be interested in, but
absolutely,
tell us where to find you and how to engage.
So absolutely. So the particular project I'm running is called Asia Venture Lab. So it's asiaventurelab.com. It's really easy to remember. The other one, of course, is BCF Coaching Academy. You can just Google that, or you can just do BCF Academy.online is our main website. So if you're wanting to test and validate an idea or build a business, then I'd urge you to test it beforehand, because the benefit of testing it is you're going to save yourself a lot of money and time. Instead of trying to work it out in 2 years, you can work this out in 3 months, whether we should go ahead, spend resources on it. And then what we also do is test it in a lean way. So your prototype, or your minimum viable product, isn't necessarily going to cost you a lot of money, because there's different ways to do this. There's rapid prototyping, then there's storyboarding, there's wireframe, all these different ways we can now do that. We don't have to build a thing to test to see if it's going to work. All right. So if you want to save time, money, you can do that. You can do the program, and obviously heartache as well, because we get to see a lot of people starting businesses. They're not going as well as they should, and they fall into mental health issues. And of course, I've presented some candidates for yourself as well, who are entrepreneurs, but they're really struggling with their mind and where they need to be taking it.
Yes, what a wonderful cooperation or opportunity to work with you. Is there anything else that you want to share as a golden nugget? And I know you told a lot about your projects and what is the methodology that you use to really get those breakouts and breakthroughs with businesses before we come to the end.
Sure. One of the things I always try to urge people is to overcome their cognitive biases, because this is the soul destroying aspect of a business. Now, that's sometimes it's a little bit hard. It's a little bit hard to tell people that their baby's ugly, right? Sometimes I see really ugly babies and I just can't tell them, but it's all related to, people's egos. And there are a handful of cognitive, there are four major, there's probably about 100 cognitive biases, but there's four major ones that do affect you in the business. The first one is, cognitive dissonance. Then there's a Dunning-Kruger effect, and that is knowing what I don't know, in the words of Donald Rumsfeld, right? So certain things you know, certain things you don't know, but there's obviously certain things you don't know that you don't know. And a lot of people fall into that trap, right? Then there's confirmation bias, right? And that is whatever I see on Google, I will follow it. So, you can just cherry pick information, even if it counters what you actually believe. And then there's optimism bias, where people are just super optimistic. It's great being optimistic, but you've also got to be realistic as well. So it's kind of a balance, be optimistic, but what we call confront the brutal facts, basically. And they're all biases. So if you can overcome those, then you're well on your way to actually transforming the way your thinking process. So that's my bit of advice. Yeah.
Amazing. And just one last question: cognitive bias, if someone wouldn't know, would you translate it as unawareness, or how would you?
It's related to unawareness, but it's related to the fact that there are certain things, there's a reality, and then there's your perceived reality. Now, if your perceived reality is different from the reality, then that's a cognitive bias, right? In a general sense. So it's a recognition that something may be true, but you don't necessarily want to agree with it. Like dissonance, like smoking. It's like people know it's unhealthy, but people still smoke. Well, that's a cognitive dissonance, right? There are other levels associated with that on a deeper level. Won't get into that, but that's another, other things. It's like your politician, for instance, he's corrupt, yet you still vote for him or her, right?
Yeah.
We won't mention any names, but that's essentially how it all works. So it's a removal from the reality. And then what happens with cognitive dissonance, or say all these confirmation bias and everything, it leads to bad decision making. Why? Because you're blurred in the reality, and that's what you need to overcome in order to make the correct decisions, in order so that you don't get trapped in a business that's not going to make you money for the next 5-10 years, right? Learn to cut it, basically, and learning about these cognitive biases will help you make that decision.
Well, thanks for that. I believe for some people who are struggling out there, this last bit could have been the change of not going down into the rabbit hole and driving themselves into anxiety and depression, but actually finding you or understanding what is the key issue or the roadblock that they cannot see.
Yeah.
Toby, well, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And as long as you can give me all of your details, of course, we will put it under the video.
Sure.
And then people can reach out to you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you. Thank you, Andre.